All right, here we are again, finding ourselves another Friday. Welcome to the Political Hour. I'm Mhariel Summers, and I'm excited to bring you guys the political news that we can all talk about what's happening on the national level, what's happening at the state level, what's happening on the local level. Let's tie it all together and understand the world that we live in. So each and every Friday, we're coming at you live on Facebook Live here via Power Plug Radio. Make sure you are tuning in from powerplugradio.com to hear all of the music that these folks are playing throughout the day, constant music, and other awesome programming. So just want to shout out to Power Plug Radio, who's also now in the App Store. If you have an Apple device, go ahead and download the app. So let's get right into it. Why? I want to open up today again with why does this matter? You know, the world is a messed up place. We all can identify reasons to be mad at the world. And so why does the politics of it all matter? It's because it answers the question of how do we repair the society that we've inherited? We've been given this world that is unequivocally, right, disproportionate in so many different levels. And as the descendant of one of the types of Americans who have suffered one of the worst plights in this country, when you analyze how we repair it, you, from my perspective, do so by utilizing the many different components of our government. Our government is so expansive, it's more expansive than the economy. It's what the economy rests on. It's what our democracy rests on. How does government work? That's the point of the political hour. This week, I took a look at the stock market, right? You guys have probably seen it, GameStop and, the Reddit, the battle between the bloggers and the hedge fund users. I didn't speak a lot about it because to be honest, don't understand a lot about the stock market. But what I did and was able to do was draw those parallels to say, okay, this is how people kind of must feel about politics, how I feel about the stock market. I don't know the inner workings. I don't know who to blame. I want the underdog to win, but I see it happening right before me, but I don't have any real sense of what's actually transpiring. I don't know the stock market. I believe that too many of our people in our community and people in America at large don't understand our politics. They don't understand the inner workings. They don't know who to blame. They want to blame somebody, but they just see it and have no real sense of how it's happening right under their feet. That's the purpose of the political hour. That's what I wanted to open up with today. And let's dive right into it. So we'll start with national politics, taking a big look at the overall American picture of it. Last week we talked about, it was the inauguration. We had new senators coming in, and impeachment was still something that was very real. It was in the hopes of a lot of, I guess, those of us who were happy to see 45 go. We wanted to make sure that he could stay gone. Well, this past week, what we found is that the impeachment process is looking glum. So very much like other important matters, vetoing, bills that the president vetoes. If the president vetoes a bill, but we still want to sign it into law, the rule says that two-thirds of the legislature must vote on this legislation for it to bypass the president. Well, to impeach a president, the same rule applies. You need two-thirds of our Senate to vote in support of impeachment for the president to face any type of consequences. What does this mean? This means that this is not a 50-50 vote, that our majority that we've gained through having Ossoff and Warnock sworn in and, having, by a slim margin, a majority, it simply means that it's not enough to impeach the president of the United States. They took a vote. It went around, and 45 of our current U.S. senators voted against it, thought it was unconstitutional to try and impeach a president who's no longer president for all of these reasons that they had. We would need a total of 17 senators, Republican senators, to vote in support of impeachment. And that's what makes it look glim. That's what makes it look like it won't happen. So if you start to hear these impeachment talks die down, this is what it's all about. I don't like it, and I imagine a lot of Americans won't. But we'll see, how these all play out state to state, with the swing of things as this administration continues to move forward. So Biden, in his first 10 days, has issued a slew of executive orders. The first 100 days of a president is always very important. It's what can the president accomplish with the stroke of a pen? This constitution that governs these national bodies, right, is one of enumerated and also restricted powers. He can't just get in and do whatever he wants, right? But there are some things that executive privilege and executive power allow for a president to do. And the first 100 days of a new presidency always show or claim to show what a president will prioritize. What I like about what our newly elected President Biden has done is in the first 10 days, he's done with a stroke of a pen things to address the pressing issues of racial inequality and racial inequity. We talked about it last week and in prior weeks, how democracy is just this slow moving, sluggish machine that has to go through all of this monotonous process to get anywhere, right? But here we are in 2021, where a sitting president signs executive orders to address the inequities in housing, the discrimination in housing. I love this. Why do I love this? If you look at history, it's the federal government. If you want to think about why communities are so segregated around America, look no further than federal policies that were issued in the 1930s, the 1920s, where developers had to follow rules that allowed for different cultures and ethnicities to be separated, that there would be a black side of town, that there would be a white side of town. And after you set that as the basis, all you then have to do is drape over it a tax code that says, well, the money that's used to keep these communities developed, to keep them well funded, will come from the tax revenues that are generated from the people who own the properties there. Well, if African Americans are always relegated to communities with poor housing, with poor infrastructure, with poor access to resources, how does this set up for equitable America? So I think him addressing that issue of housing and directing his the different bodies of government under his administration to address those is key. Another big thing was ending the federal contracts with private prisons. Now, I get it, folks. This doesn't just abolish private prisons. Private prisons don't just go away. This is not what he can do with a stroke of a pen, right? This takes legislation. This takes other state governments and other parts of government to make that actually go away. But what we see is a president who's championing it and who's doing what he can in the first couple of days of being elected to limit our federal government's participation in it. Private prisons are nobody's friend. We don't privatize our police force. We don't privatize our courthouses. Why would we privatize the most punitive part of society that any American can fall into? It doesn't make sense. And so the people who are benefiting from private prisons, the wealth that is generating, we have to find different ways, other responsible ways in our American economy to operate this very fragile part that we've clearly seen is what overpopulated by minorities. That we've clearly seen disproportionately is set up to keep communities of color, minorities in this recidivist cycle of poverty and violence. Let's do away with it. I like the first steps. There were other parts of this racial equity executive order that the president extended, trying to protect Chinese citizens and citizens from the Pacific Islands, from the I guess stigma associated with the COVID virus. Also, a outreach to Native Americans and just trying to bring in that tribal sovereignty. Stopped development on the the Keystone Pipeline. This is important. Let's repair the relationships with the minority communities. Let's welcome those who were written off as un-American into the American fold and make this a nation that works for everybody. That's what I'm getting from this. There's more coming from Biden in the weeks to come and in the months to come. But Congress is going to play a very, very, very important role in what actually happens legislative-wise. So proud of him for what he's done thus far. Let's keep our eyes on it, though, shall we? But state politics, guys. State politics. So there is a lot happening here at the state level. Much of what affects us day to day, people don't realize is happening at the state or the local level. When we're talking about the schools and the type of pay our teachers get, the type of funding and access and resources our students receive, when we talk about law enforcement and the rules that they have to abide by, the types of training and implicit bias and diversity and all of these components that make justice and policing so key. Hospitals, access to healthcare, vaccine during a pandemic, tolls, roads. I mean, we're driving, most of you drive around the Tampa Bay area. What roads aren't under construction right now? How many people can drive to Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater in the middle of the day without running into, some type of holdup? The environment, our beaches, our water, drilling, access to food, access to clean water, to healthy choices. All of these things, guys, all of these things all point back to the government. Again, we opened up the show with why does this stuff matter? All of these things point back to the government. So our state and our local is where we'll spend the bulk of our time today, talking about what's going on here. So in the state of Florida, we have a very important session coming up, but right now our legislators, our state representatives, and our state senators, they are right in the middle of committee. And in committee, as we talked about in previous shows, these folks are looking and vetting the hundreds of pieces of legislation that these people we voted for are submitting. So instead of changing Florida's laws and constitutions year by year, what happens is, a legislator is able to propose a piece of law, to propose a bill. That bill is assigned to several committees, has to sit through several subcommittees, and votes are taken. And a lot of these bills die in committee. So you can have a senator, you can have a state house rep, even on a national level, it works the same way. But we're talking about the state of Florida here. And in this process that our current senators and current house reps are in, these folks can present any type of legislation that they want, right? From body cameras to police, to ending charter schools. This session, we have people who have presented legislation for legalizing marijuana, We've had people present legislation for renaming one of the longest highways in Florida, the Donald Trump Highway. Uh, um, you see all kind of pieces of legislation being filed. And so what our folks are currently doing as we speak, week in and week out, is sitting through different committees, different hearings, listening to the general public plead for why, we should do something or why we shouldn't. That's where they're at right now. But um, something that is looming is our budget, our budget, our Florida budget. This past week, the governor of the state released a proposal based on what he's assumed that we'll receive from federal funding. $96.6 billion. That is the proposed budget. Before this week, it was about 93, almost $93 billion. But the governor's come back through and said $96.96 billion is the budget that he hopes to approve, that he hopes that our state... Now, folks, it's still up to the state legislature. Just because this is what the governor proposes, it's kind of like on a national level when the president proposes what the budget should be. It's up to the legislature to figure out how to make this all happen. Well, why? Why do you need them to figure it out? The thing about it is there's so many working parts of our government. There's so many mouths that feed off of the hand of the government. So we just talked about it. So we just talked about how you have your hospitals, your law enforcement, your school, your healthcare, your environment. All of these entities rely on government funding every year. Not only that, we have our new organizations that are sprouting up. We have people who are trying to do things in the community who could use support and who are asking the government for extra 10, 15, 20, 100,000, couple million in some cases. And so $96.6 billion, it dries up very quick when you have all of these mouths to feed. About 35% of our budget comes from the federal government. That's important to know because it is important for folks to understand where the federal government's power extends over the states. A lot of what the federal government requires the state to do comes through the threat of withholding any bit of this 35% of federal funding. It's already scarce, right? We're already talking about a state that needs as many dollars as it can get. If the federal government says that we aren't going to send any part of this 35%, that puts the state in a negative position, in a red position. And so some of the examples, I guess the most notorious example is the Civil Rights Bill. The Civil Rights Bill and the Brown versus Board of Education, where the federal government said, look, if you do not integrate your schools, integrate your school districts, integrate your classrooms, then we will withhold federal funding. Everyone just had to do it because they need the federal dollars. Another landmark case that affected all Americans is the drinking age. At one point in time in America, there were differing drinking ages in different states. You could buy alcohol at 19. It was less of a alcohol percentage, but some states were allowing just the different drinking ages. Until a Supreme Court landmark case came in and said that you shouldn't be able to drink at different ages in different states. Congress came back through the next year and said, look, if you're going to allow people to drink who are under the age of 21, then federal highway funds will be withheld. It was challenged. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, look, this is how it has to be. If you're going to allow different ages to drink, then these funds will be withheld. And so very quickly, the law of the land became 21 or older. These are the inner workings, guys. This is how our government is working. It's how it works even to this day. Our state budget, 35% is coming from the Fed, um, but it's more money than some thought we would get. So there are some cuts in some areas, but some boosts in some areas. And this is where I like to 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 think about what our governor is proposing and think about some of the implications, right? So you have $233 increase per student in this budget proposal. You have minimum uh, the salary requirements for teacher starting, that's going up. Um, you have things, $178 million to combat the opioid epidemic, being supported by some of the federal funds. These don't sound bad, but without thinking about the other implications, they're just not telling the complete story. So we are raising the minimum salary for teachers, but for teachers who are starting out, but we're not talking specifically about what this is going to do for those long-term teachers, for those teachers who have been in the education system um, for 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, on the prior pay scale, who now are very similar after all of their years of work, very similar in salary to a new teacher. We'll have to hear more from teachers unions to understand the viability of that aspect. The school districts are in dire need as it stands. I don't know much about it, but Hillsborough County schools are struggling right now financially. There's a lot of worry that their school district could run out of money before the end of the school year. Will this increase by the governor give us anything to address the needs that are already so pressing in so many school districts? $178 million to opioids. This is not a bad thing. In fact, it will help a lot of the programs, even some of the local ones that we have here. My question and what I wonder is, where is the response to the needs for our community's drug issues, right? When will the issues that have affected marginalized minority communities be viewed as a crisis, one worthy of hundreds of millions of dollars, such as the opioid crisis? Too often we end up in the criminal justice system. Too often we end up being penalized, and we're looking for solutions. We're looking for solutions to these decades of entrenched inequality as it relates to the justice system. And when I see this budget and I see $178 million going toward the opioid crisis, that this is not being treated as a tough on drugs issue, but as as an illness and as an ail to society. Where does that empathy translate over, to minority communities? But I'll tell you what we do have in this proposed budget. We have $30 million to corrections. We have $30 million to the correction system, $12.4 million for at-risk youth. How are these dollars going to be implemented? Who are they going to benefit? How do we find more responsible ways to approach a community that has been relegated to crime and drug use there has been penalized and criminalized. How do we turn this into to a conversation about an epidemic and how we approach it um, from a healing and restoration point of view? I think some local officials have got it down. I'm excited to hear or to get into the second half of the political hour here. We're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to talk in the second half about our local officials and how we are addressing some of our own uh, pandemics and epidemics as it relates to like gun violence and as it relates to just the breakdown of getting the people the resources they need um, to getting our local people to be considered in government, to be considered by government. We're going to dive into some of that. We'll touch a little bit more about what our state legislature is going to be debating on. As we talked about last week, some of these bills and legislature that's being presented right now, it's too soon to talk about their viability in some cases. Hundreds of pieces are being considered. These members are sitting through meetings week after week. But one that I want to talk about in particular is House Bill 1, the protest bill, the anti protest bill, as it has been referred to. We'll talk about House Bill 1. We'll talk about what's going on here locally and how it affects us. I'm Mhariel Summers. This is the Political Hour being brought to you by Power Plug Radio. Download the app, powerplugradio.com, to listen to. And I'll be back, guys. I'll be right back. All right. All right. So we're back. Welcome back to the second half of the political hour. Again, I'm Mhariel Summers, and I'm so happy to be able to bring you guys this show each and every Friday at 11 a.m. from Power Plug Radio. Power Plug Radio, local radio, African American owned. Got to plug that. But make sure you download the app, guys, and that you're tuning in from powerplugradio.com. These folks are doing amazing programming each and every week. And the tunes, the jams, right? So I'm here to talk to you guys about politics. We've talked about why it matters. We've talked about the fact that some people don't understand its, relatability to the very realities that we have to live in. And I've tried to tie some of what's happening into how it affects us in the real world. I've talked about Biden. I've talked about some of the executive orders that he's passed. We've talked about, what's sort of happening here at the state level. But I want to spend a little time talking about House Bill 1. A lot of people, I have the privilege, the luxury of working for the Honorable State Representative Michelle Rayner. And one thing I can tell you that I've noticed this week is a lot of people are upset about House Bill 1. House Bill 1, otherwise known as the public disorder bill, the mob intimidation bill, the anti-protest bill, the bill that is going to criminalize those of us who seek to exercise our First Amendment rights. House Bill 1 passed its first subcommittee. If you're unfamiliar with it, this mob intimidation clause, it's going to say that 3 or more people with the common intent to attempt or compel or induce another person by threat or force to do any act. How vague is that? To do any act? To do any act. 3 or more people with the common intent to attempt or compel or induce another person by threat or force to do any act or assume and abandon any particular viewpoint. To assume or abandon or to, you don't have to do any act. If you and 2 other people are protesting the unlawful murder of an individual, and it is deemed by law enforcement that this is a mob with the intention to attempt or induce, compel people to abandon their viewpoints, those people are guilty. This law is a crazy violation of people's First Amendment rights. And so many of our Democratic legislators here at the state level are going to fight tooth and nail to stop this from coming into fruition. Remember, as we talked about in previous episodes, here in Florida, this is a Republican-governed state. Statewide, we only have our Commissioner Nikki Fried. Other than that, everyone else leans right. Our governor leans right. Our House of Representatives leans right. Our Speaker of the House is a right leaning individual. Our Senate leans right. Every important chamber that it takes to make law in the state of Florida is a right-leaning chamber. Unfortunately, that means for egregious legislation like House Bill 1, it has viability. It's Republican-led and supported. It passed its first round of committee with an 11-6 vote. And I don't know how strong the fence is going to be to stop them from passing bad legislation because they have the majority. This is the importance of us understanding politics, of us understanding the makeup of what's happening in our state legislature that comes down, that impacts us all of the Floridians here. House Bill 1 is one of those things. It has elevated charges if you are, caught up in this type of mob, if you're caught up in this type of what's deemed to be illegal protests, it's now a felony. Felony charges. Now you must remain in custody until your first appearance. No bail. This is what's on the table. This is what's on the legislative table. But I have hope. I have hope. Again, folks, I have the privilege of working for Representative Michelle Rayner. One of the leadership positions that our rep has been assigned to and taken with pride is position on the Justice Appropriations Subcommittee, which is the next committee that this horrid bill must travel through. This gives our local rep the opportunity to put this bill on trial. Mind you, we supported our rep because of her experience and extensive experience in civil rights litigation, understanding the law and understanding how we must defend the law to protect society's most marginalized populations. This is who we put into office. So I think it's a blessing, especially for us here as Pinellas County citizens in District 70, who are outside of Pinellas County, to have a representative who's going to be able to take this bill and be able to ask the right questions, to be able to put the right merits before the committee, and hopefully slow its traction. So that's what we got going on. That's what we got going on at the state level. I want to now shift to what's going on locally. I want to finish up locally. We got just a little bit more time here. And so I want to spend the next bit of the show talking about what's happening in the Tampa Bay area, what's happening right here in St. Petersburg. As we know, the end of 2020 ended with a lot of heart-wrenching gun violence here in South St. Pete. Too many young people under the age of 25, under the age of 30, have been incarcerated, have been taken, have been, in situations that we all hope to eradicate. All of us who have Black progression at the forefront hope to eradicate. What I love about our local government is that we can look there and we can see the efforts being also made with just as much vigor and just as much passion. So that's the long way of saying that in response to the recent wave of gun violence, we've had two of our city council women take up a campaign called Enough is Enough. And Enough is Enough has been consistent, to say the very least, consistent in its effort to examine all of the different avenues of what's happening as it relates to gun violence, to have a strong presence, to have a consistent presence. What I love about Enough is Enough is it's being led by local officials, our two local city council women, Councilwoman Lisa Wheeler-Bowman, Councilwoman Deborah Fix Sanders, who represent District 5 and District 7 respectively, led a discussion this past week, and we have the graphic up here with all of these individuals led by Dr. Butler, Dr. LaDonna Butler, who specializes in mental health, who has built her career understanding minority mental health and the importance of bringing the resources to the people who need them. This was attended by advocates. It was a panel that had advocates, organizers, and parents. Most importantly, folks, parents of those who have been taken from us one way or another by gun violence. What I love about this effort is that there's learning involved for everyone. our councilwomen aren't taking a position of greater than thou, or are trying to look down on anyone with this enough is enough campaign. What they are showing through their continued efforts is that enough is enough means whatever it takes. Starting from where we are right here, whatever we have to learn, whatever we have to implement, we are going to figure out what we can do to move the needle on such a very delicate and detrimental issue in our community. That's what I love about our councilwomen. That's what I respect about Lisa Wheeler Bowman and Deborah Fix Sanders, respectively, is that they are councilwomen who have a grasp on what it is they can do to move the needle forward on these important issues that affect this community in particular. Now, there are cynics, right? Somebody's going to say, well, they should do X, Y, and Z. Well, they shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, right? Such as life. Someone's always going to have an opinion, but what I challenge you to do is present what else they should do. What I do know about these elected officials in particular is that they're responsive, that they are willing to hear what can be done, but what we can't do is sell them short with this with empty rhetoric, right? With these open-ended assaults on the lack of Black progress throughout the years. Guys, we're stepping into it. Every month, every week, every generation, on a broader spectrum, we're stepping into how we are repairing what America has given us. And what we can't do is indict those who make the barrier breaking moves, the record breaking moves, the ones who are out pounding the pavement the hardest, who find themselves in positions. We have to support those individuals. We have to have the insight and foresight to understand what it is that they're doing for us. And if it's something else that they could be doing, I'm inviting you to bring those opinions forward. Because if it's anything I know about these women who are serving on council, is that they're going to hear what's going on. But in their current political context, I'm confident that we are addressing through policy, through all various policy measures, ways to be inclusive, ways to bridge equity and equality gaps. All of these are at the forefront. Which brings me to another point. We have an important election coming up this year. My fellow St. Petersburg, Pinellas County residents, I know we just voted for the president. I know people were just at your door knocking and making sure people are registered, this, that, and the third. But believe me, guys, another important election is happening this year in the city of St. Petersburg. This year, we will elect a new mayor. We will elect city council members for District 2, District 4, District 6. This is super important, and it's happening very quickly. Here we are. Today is going to be the last Friday in January, right? So month 1 is already over. Month 7, July 26th is the deadline to register to vote in this year's coming election. So month 1 is over. We're moving into month 2, but I'm telling you, in month 7 is the deadline to register to vote, because in month 8, August the 24th of this year, we're going to have a primary election for all of these previous positions that I mentioned. So we're going to have a primary for mayor. We're going to have a primary for city council, depending on who decides to enter their hat in the race. Right now, let's take a look at who is running. So right now, we have our 2 front runners in the mayoral race have emerged as former County Commissioner Ken Welch who represented us here on the county commission faithfully, and current city councilwoman Darden Rice, who has tried to serve as a strong moderate who can represent all sides. Former House Representative Wingay Newton is also in the race. And then we have a 20-year-old student from USF, Mr. Michael Ingram. Four thus far who have entered their hat in our mayoral race. One of these individuals is going to represent us, guys, and it's so important that you and everybody you know get out and participate in this election. We're going to do our best to bring these candidates in. But as it relates to our city council, District 2, 4, and 6. So District 2, District 6 are having an incumbent. An incumbent means somebody who's already in office. If you're in office and you run again, you're an incumbent. Like you're running again for an office you already hold. For District 2, that's Councilwoman Brandy Gabbard for District 2. She's going to run again and look to hold that down and thus far has no opponents. Councilwoman Gina Driscoll for District 6, same thing. She has been holding that position down and is going to run again and thus far is running unopposed. The only slot that is thus far looking like a race is for District 4. Former council, or she will be at some point, former city councilwoman Darden Rice, as I mentioned, is running for mayor against Kim Welch, as we see here in the graphic. It's going to leave her district up for a new representative. Clifford Hobbs, Wendy Wesley are the two individuals who have entered their hat into that race. And again, during the political hour, we will try and get a sit down with either or maybe hopefully both of those candidates. That's what's shaping up. That's what you have before you, St. Petersburg. Let's not sleep on it because the importance of the mayor, the importance of city council, that's going to depend. We talked last week about how the city includes its marginalized members, its minority communities, how it develops going forward, including those communities, not only our history but our wants and our needs in the current era. It's going to determine how included we are in what St. Pete is. So let's not sleep on it. One of the important things that emerged this week is the TROP, the discussion around the TROP. Hopefully you guys have had the chance to review some of the proposals. If you haven't, just look it up right there. Tropicana Fields proposals, right there on Google, right? And it will show you that our city has received about 8 different proposals about what we can do with that land. We talked a little bit last week about, what this historic land meant to the Black community here in St. Pete. How maybe some of those homes weren't necessarily owned, but the community itself was a Black community. And how a lot of these families were uprooted for a stadium that didn't even have a team assigned to it yet. And so here we are where the Rays, our current mayor, Mayor Kreisman, has said, the Rays are not being fair with what it is that they are wanting. He's done the transparent job of putting forth the Rays proposal so that we can see it. But what is it going to be? What is it going to amount to? I think a more politically pressing question is, should Mayor Kreisman decide? Should Mayor Kreisman be the decision maker on what is happening to that particular piece of land as he's on his way out, right? We're 7 months away from a primary, 10 months away from electing a new mayor. Does this current mayor have enough time to adequately decide who and what should happen with this land and whose hands it should go in? That's a big decision. But proposals are exciting. They if you go and you take a look at what the St. Pete Times and other entities have conjured up, some of these proposals are very exciting. But my question still remains: where is the Black community's input? If this is historically a land that was redeveloped from underneath, so to speak, our community. Another question is, what do we want? What is it that we want out of this land? We aren't asking for already? We're already asking for housing. We're already asking for affordable housing. We're already asking for jobs. We're already asking for access to some of the development that's taking place. We're already asking for equity. So the proposals are exciting, but my question is, where is the room for the African American community's input? In my personal opinion, folks, I think it's going to come down to who we elect as mayor, who we elect to serve on 2, 4, and 6, if anybody else enters these races, and how these local officials really work with the community. It's going to be on us to keep our eyes open, to actually ask, to actually have demands, to actually have wishes and wants that are deeper, like I said prior, than these open-ended, non-specific requests. What I like, and what I'm going to end the political hour with this morning, is one of my favorite initiatives that is taking off in our local government, that sprouted from local grassroots organization. And that is the Community Benefits Agreement, the CBA, the Community Benefits Agreement. So Gypsy Gallardo is the CEO of One Community, an organization that in the last decade, I mean, we're in 2021 right now, but in the last decade had a 2020 plan to reduce poverty by 30%. Now, a lot of folks seen the mayor, if you follow him on social media, he touted that St. Pete's poverty had dropped by 40%. And some people were a little reluctant to give him the credit. But what the mayor is celebrating is really data that is championed by One Community, that this 2020 plan to reduce poverty by 30% has actually had its effect, and that there's more opportunity and less poverty in South St. Petersburg than, say, 2013. Well, what One Community has now moved on and moved over to doing is the One Community plan, in which they've had these 19 big ideas that they whittled down to the most supported. And one of the most supported was the Community Benefits Agreement. In the Community Benefits Agreement, what it's asking our city council to put into ordinance is that any development that happens in the city of St. Petersburg must have certain structural reforms that consider the African American community in this city, that consider the minority and the marginalized in this city, so that we can build and maintain wealth. We talked a little bit earlier in the show about how federal housing policies in the 30s and the earlier parts of last century created these Black communities and white communities and separated and segregated us. Well, now that we have these separate communities and we have all this history built in these communities, we don't want to lose our communities. We don't want development to turn into gentrification. No, what we want is equity. What we'd like is the ability to have our communities, our museums, our way of life reflect that of the other citizens who enjoy the same city we live in. What I love about the CBA is it's an overarching commitment and overarching agreement so that we don't have to worry about it case by case. Well, what about the Trop? Well, what about the old Kmart? Well, what about the old skating rink? Well, what about, we don't have to sit here and digest case by case to get our equity. It will just kind of be embedded. That's local politics. Folks, I hope this political hour you found something that convinces you of why this stuff matters. I hope you've gotten more insight and I've been able to explain to you in a way that helps you understand the inner workings of our government. And I hope you're inspired to tune in again next Friday. Power Plug Radio is bringing you this content. Make sure you visit powerplugradio.com, download the app, but please join me again next Friday. Let's talk about what's happening nationally. Let's talk about what's happening at the state level. And let's talk about the local politics. Let's keep politics relevant in the mind of our community. Let's debate about it. And let's be involved. I'm Mhariel Summers, and I am so happy to be here with you. And I'll see you guys next week.